live here on this Venezuela Insider live stream. And yeah, today is February 8th of 2026. Yeah, another busy week. We are on a warp speed right now. And yeah, let's wait people to connect to the. Give me a second, checking here, checking here the everything going correctly. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. If there's any particular technical detail, please let me know. Well, we already read what we have on the table today. A lot of news happening this week. Warp speed changes. We're going to talk a little bit more about the U.S. presence in Venezuela, especially from the new ambassador Laura Dogu. Other thing, of course, that we have to talk. This is important. The amnesty law that was approved this week by Venezuela's Congress, the oil investments in the country, and the new flights. This is important. And we're going to address the safety situation in Venezuela, and we're going to address a couple of other topics. Now, before we start, this is, Super Bowl Sunday for everyone watching in the States. And yeah, and even on the Super Bowl, we have Venezuela involved. The New England Patriots kicker, Andy Borregales, a fellow Venezuelan, will be playing the Super Bowl. And if the Patriots indeed win the Super Bowl, Borregales will be the first Venezuelan to win the Super Bowl. So, yeah. So, go Pats. And yeah, still I like the Seahawks, actually. Have a soft spot for the Seahawks since the Legion of Boom, with Richard Sherman, I remember, and Bobby Wagner, and Cam Chancellor, starting on his prime. And yeah, give me a second, please. I have to take care of something real quick, and we can continue. Yeah. Sorry about it. Yeah, we're live. Yeah, I had to fix something on the setup, and yeah, I think we're gonna be cool from now. Now, before we go to the chart of this week, we have some breaking news, and the opposition leader Juan Pablo Guaripa has been released after almost a year on captivity. This is probably something that you might not care because you want to talk about the beaches, the real estate, or whatever. And the awesome stuff about Venezuela, that of course we love talking about the awesome stuff of Venezuela, but we also have to take care of the brass tacks. So this gentleman, Guanipa, he is the number one. He's one of the number twos of the opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, and he was detained for political reasons since May of last year, and that will be the equivalent if Donald Trump, let's say Maria Corina Machado is Donald Trump. That will be the equivalent of arresting Stephen Miller, someone like that, someone very important, someone very close to Trump. And yeah. Who says, perdedor, nunca lo logra. Yeah, well, why you're watching a channel of a loser? So, I'm sorry. Hola, hola, ¿cuál es tu película de terror favorita? What is your horror movie? Well, I don't know. Great question. Maybe Saw. Yeah, Jigsaw. Yeah, that's the one, Jigsaw. Yeah, let's go with that. And yeah, well, still, thank you. Thank you, Sunshine, and purple monkey, whatever. Well, thank you for joining. Anyways, this is very important because one of the biggest issues regarding Venezuela is is how random and how arbitrary, arguably the biggest issue about Venezuela, especially if you're watching this from abroad, that you want certainty on an uncertain world. And if something defines Venezuela, it's actually uncertainty. And having certainty on trusted institutions, in how rule of law is applied, not random or arbitrary or even worse, politically motivated. And that's actually why it's a great news, this particular release. Okay, let's start with topics for today. And the first one is the presence that I know I've talked this a lot, but still, it's very important, of the head of mission of the State Department in Venezuela, Laura Dogu. We already talked about her. She has a lot of experience dealing with conflicted nations in Latin America, like Honduras and Nicaragua. Venezuela fits the bill. I believe she was an hostage negotiator or something like that. And she is the foreign affairs advisor of the General Dan Kane, that is the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. So this woman knows very well how to handle the conflicted situations in a particular country, especially this particular new paradigm that we have in Venezuela, where Venezuela is sovereign, they have their own government and whatever, but still some tutelage by the US. Of course, we still have the military buildup, that something that I thought I wasn't going to talk yet again, but yeah, still the elephant in the room. We have the military buildup in the country right now, close to the country, in the Caribbean, and this is something that, okay, if it stays there, well, we're not going to talk about it that much, but still there, so you have to consider that thing. Also, we have a new U.S. Southern Command, commander on Southcom. This is the region of the world on the U.S. military that controls the military buildup in Venezuela. So this is important, remember. And we already have a particular president on that, on January 3. Well, this gentleman, the new commander, is the Army General Francis Donovan, and will oversee, the Southcom, and the Southcom, of course, oversees the military buildup in Venezuela right now. And what else? Also, we have to go back again with Laura Dogu, that she had a meeting with the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, and with the House Speaker, Jorge Rodriguez, that is Delcy's brother. And they are like the top authorities in the country right now. Well, anyways, they had a particular talk, and also Laura published a video on what's the plan for the U.S. within Venezuela. Apparently, first we got this particular picture of the meeting, was on Monday, and was very cordial and respectful. However, the problem with that particular meeting is the U.S. accounts on social media, the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela accounts, in Twitter, Instagram, whatever. They mention Delcy Rodriguez and Jorge Rodriguez, just plain Delcy, plain Jorge, without their official titles, and that they are president and House Speaker, and just basically they are not recognizing as legitimate authorities, basically just the guys that they have to deal with. And even the speaker, Jorge Rodriguez, wasn't pleased about it. So Laura Dogu, the U.S. head of mission, basically she is an appointee by Marco Rubio, that allegedly is the one running the strategy for Venezuela. What they are saying is what Laura Logu explicitly said is that she is here in Venezuela, she is in Venezuela with the sole purpose of supervising the three-step plan of Marco Rubio and the Trump administration. First, the stability of the country, that the country is safe to visit. We're going to address safety a little bit later because it's a weird thing to explain. They're going to address the safety, the country, making safe. The second step is the economic prosperity, since, of course, the Venezuela's economy has been artificially destroyed, well, mostly due to corruption and mismanagement, and of course, to the sanctions. So let's be honest. And since the sanctions will be removed, and also the artificial destruction of the country, that was the strategy, is also gonna be removed as well. So we're gonna have like somehow free market capitalism in the country. Kinda. Yeah, well, anyways, it's a weird situation. And the step number 3 is a transition in the country. And yet again, so she is not Laura Dogu, she is not a particular, she's not a particular ambassador that only comes to basically communicate with the local government on the issues between both countries. No, she's basically taking steps about execution, enforcement of a particular agenda that comes from Washington. That's the reading, the consensus that you might get. Well, anyways, and this is important because that creates way more certainty compared to just a few weeks, and regarding investments for not only US companies, but companies and investors worldwide, especially from the West. And on that particular segment, we are going to get on the issue that right now, as we speak, a lot of oil multinationals are either requesting licenses to the US Treasury Department in order to operate in Venezuela without sanctions. The sanctions removed, well, kinda. You have basically two kinds of sanctions. One is against the individuals, Venezuelan individuals. Most of them are from government members, top-ranked government members and their families and collaborators and whatever. And the other kind of sanction is against the government as a whole and against doing business with Venezuela's government, with Maduro and whatever. Including Maduro himself, he was sanctioned, still, actually, he's technically sanctioned. Well, that's for another day. But anyways, right now the US issued 2 general licenses. And these particular general licenses that they are issued in order to, let's say, bypass the sanctions and for limited operations and whatever. 2 new general licenses have been approved by the US Treasury Department in order to expand the current operation. So you have this particular strap on the regarding sanctions, again, put on the Venezuelan oil economy, since the Venezuelan oil, if you want to do business on the Venezuelan oil industry, you basically have to deal with the government directly. And that's why one of the reasons that the sanctions were put in place. But right now, with this new general license that expands operations, makes way more easy to operate in Venezuela for a big oil multinational, and several companies are taking advantage. First, the incumbents like Chevron, Repsol, Eni, and Mauren and Prom, they are expanding their licenses in order to expand their operations and presence in Venezuela. You also have companies like BP, like Royal Dutch Shell. We have just a new one, a joint venture between a Brazilian company and a Swedish company, Maha Capital. So both general licenses and specific license for important multinationals are being approved as we speak. But the most important thing is those licenses not only allow but encourage further production in the country. So in order to increase the production of oil, natural gas, and whatever. And also the refineries on Louisiana and the Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, as you want to call it. And most of those refineries are buying or are interested in purchasing Venezuelan crude oil that right now the oil revenue is being managed by the United States. The revenue of such oil is controlled and monitored by the US, goes to a escrow account in Qatar, and then is sent back to Venezuela, but with a particular conditions that had to go to the private sector, and the Venezuelan government only gets a cut that will only be allowed to be spent on basically bread and butter issues in the country, not for discretionary spending. That's basically the new status quo for the Venezuelan oil industry. And what else? Yeah, let me check here. Have any new messages? I think we're cool. Another company, not only oil companies that already mentioned this week, Starlink from Elon Musk will be officially available in Venezuela. It's already available in the country. Starlink was blocked in Venezuela since many years. We have to remember that Elon Musk and President Maduro had a particular feud on social media, and actually they thread each other to a boxing fight or something that never happened. But anyways, not only Starlink is available in the country, but also retailers, domestic retailers, are selling the Starlink kits in the country. So basically, if you come from abroad, you can just shop on one of these major chain stores and get your own without doing that much. Also, regarding the oil revenue that will be monitored, to the U.S. Secretary Scott Bessent, Venezuela's oil revenue funds will be monitored by outside auditors that still don't know who they are. Other general license approved in the country authorizes the chemicals in order to dilute the Venezuelan crude oil that we know that most of them, not all, but most, is heavy crude oil. So you need these particular chemicals in order to make the crude oil lighter and be able to export. And well, we still have, yet again, why I've said this like thousands of times, but I'm going to say that again, especially for the new audience, how the Venezuelan economy works. The oil economy gets the revenue. Venezuela always has a trade surplus thanks to the oil industry. Then that revenue goes to the non-oil economy, and that's when you have prosperity. This particular process was interrupted or halted thanks to terrible policies and corruption, mismanagement, whatever, and also sanctions, I have to say. Now, every time that you see a new particular company, a new particular oil multinational, whatever, this is just the oil sector. And these particular companies, they need to spend a lot because the oil industry is very capital intensive. So you need to spend on a lot of things for your employees, the payroll, the technology, equipment, supply chain, infrastructure, whatever. That spending will then go to the non-oil economy, and it's going to trickle down beautifully, very beautifully, to the rest of the non-oil economy. That's why I have to address this thing a lot, the oil industry, because if that's not your case, that you are involved in the oil industry, you need to care because it's going to affect any particular interest that you have in the country. If you want to invest in another thing, real estate, cost of living, migration, social dynamics, dating, whatever. Everything will be impacted positively, and when shit happens, negatively, regarding the oil industry. So let's see new messages. Rennie John, hi, well, hi yourself, welcome to the live stream. And that's why I need to track this thing and give every little detail every time that we have to talk about Venezuelan economics and whatever, or real estate, because affects everything, every particular interaction in the country. Okay, what else we have here? Also, we have to talk about India buying Venezuelan crude oil. That's more of a geopolitical stunt by Donald Trump, basically forcing, politely, India to buy Venezuelan crude oil in order to replace the oil that comes from Russia and Iran, the US geopolitical enemies, and you got it from an ally or something, an ally, a protector, I don't know how to call it, Venezuela is right now. Also, this is very important, non-oil companies are investing in Venezuela as well. Like in Colombia, I've said this many times, that there is a lot of money on the sidelines, roughly $500 billion or 700 billion US dollars, waiting on the sidelines to be invested in the country. Remember, Venezuela is a 120 billion economy on GDP, and you have 6-7 times of liquid cash waiting, and right now they are not waiting, they are starting to pour that money in the country. So Venezuela's economy should be a $500 billion economy, but right now has the size of 120. So that gap from 1.2 to 5 is going to match reality very quickly. It's going to happen in a couple of years. So that's why if you are starting to thinking, yeah, you most likely are going to be late to the party. So also this week, the Council of Foreign Affairs mentions about, Venezuela's oil in geopolitics, according to of the Council of Foreign Relations, always confused. The oil grade that Venezuela produces is exactly the grade that the United States needs, argues Natasha Caneva, Managing Director of Global Oil and Commodities Research at JP Morgan Chase, in a recent conversation on commodity markets. 70% of the Gulf Coast refinery's capacity is built to take Venezuelan oil. It's heavy crude. That's exactly what we need, so it's valuable. So if you look at that and say, okay, actually it makes a lot of sense for us, one way or another, to get involved in Venezuela, Caneva says. So, yet again, basically saying something that I've been saying for many years, but now since the people who charge way more than me are saying it now, is that you are believing me. But well, anyway, I'm still increasing my rates anyways, and since I'm aware that most of these people on my particular area of expertise, I should just match whatever they are charging, whatever. Something, for instance, there is this analyst that I found on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, that is great, is an American, I believe, has an Italian last name, and he talks about, his content is all about oil industry worldwide, and he knows a lot about Venezuela's oil industry. I have to give, credit when credit is due. But still, a little bit lackluster on the real situation, historical situation in Venezuela. Still, it's just slightly behind the curve. His name is Jack Prandelli. And by the way, shout out to you, Jack, but still, you are still behind the curve on a bunch of things regarding Venezuela, but I think you do a great job. And according to Jack, says that Venezuelan crude isn't back, is selectively clearing. At what discount does demand really disappear? So basically, Jack is saying that the only reason why the Venezuelan crude oil is valuable, or the main reason, is because it's right now being sold with a little bit of coercion by the United States. Well, Jack, if you're listening to this, let me give you the answer. The Venezuelan crude oil always has demand because, okay, I know it's heavy, but still valuable. There is a demand. Crude oil is like everything else. I mean, it's not, let's say, a prime cut of ribeye or something like that, or sirloin, or whatever is your favorite, or a tomahawk, or a T-bone, or whatever. But still, it's meat. And just like in the oil industry, you need variety, and the Venezuelan crude oil is special for doing certain things, getting certain products, and also the most important thing, just like the lady on the Council of Foreign Relations said, the US refineries need that particular heavy crude oil. So stop with these people that know anything about science and how crude oil works. The heavy crude oil is also valuable, by the way. Now, that's not the case of Jack Prandelli, but he is, let's say, a skeptic on the value of the Venezuelan crude oil. Let me tell you, Jack, that before the sanctions, actually, the Venezuelan crude oil used to trade just at the same rate, kind of the same rate as the WTI, the West Texas Intermediate, that is the worldwide reference of the oil price. So, Jack, I mean, you look like a very smart guy, very well educated, so you can do the research. You don't have to take my word at face value, just do your own diligence, and that's it. Because a lot of the terrible analysis, because I have to deal with a lot of terrible analysis about Venezuela, one of the main reasons is recency bias. That the only thing that most of these analysts about Venezuela, by the way, this is not against Jack Prandelli, that he knows what he's talking about, but still, underperforming regarding Venezuela. Well, anyways, but most of these terrible analysts, the only thing that they know about Venezuela is the news, CNN, or Fox News, or the Journal, or Al Jazeera, or whatever. They don't know very little about Venezuela. Most of them can't even point Venezuela in a map. They don't speak Spanish. They don't know Venezuelan people. And yeah, well, you know that I have experience, decades of experience, in all those things. Also, the Financial Times this week published a very interesting article saying that to post-Maduro opportunities. And this is just an op-ed by the Financial Times, but I think it's worth your while. And yeah, there are a lot of opportunities, because basically the only thing that you needed is stop destroying the Venezuelan economy, and now that the destruction has been halted, then the economy can grow back again to their natural size of $500 billion of GDP, instead of the miserable 120 that we have right now. And the match is going to happen very soon. My prediction is between 5 years, I might be underselling this, could be in 3. And I have my reasons to think, yeah. So this thing about Venezuela, this is not something to sit back, okay, let's see what happens. I'm just going to keep back and whatever. No. This thing is going to happen quick, so you're going to lose the window. Or when you want to enter to the party, you're going to miss most of the great opportunities. You have to compete with thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs and investors. The Washington Post also, they stole my copywriting, already did a video about it. The economic outlook for Venezuela has improved dramatically after years of economic collapse. Yeah. And the Post, of course, late to the party compared to me. Economists said that the country could see double-digit growth this year. So, yeah, yet again, okay, feel free, Washington Post, you don't have to pay a royalty or anything for using my own copywriting, but yeah, okay. At least you're getting it right. Okay. Anyways, very interesting piece. ConocoPhillips, that was one of the major oil multinationals from the US, of course, that got burned in Venezuela during Hugo Chavez, they want the payback of their loss or the losses in Venezuela that they got expropriated by Hugo Chavez. Is an amount roughly around $10 billion with a B, before they start operating in Venezuela. Again, now let's say they want to play tough with Donald Trump, and they want Trump, the art of a deal, or the best deal maker or whatever. Yeah, good luck with that. But I think, they might get something over there. Let's go with the amnesty law and why this is important. Because in Venezuela, we have thousands of political prisoners. The last amount is like 700, something like that. I don't have the bona fide number. Some NGOs have a number, roughly 700. Some people talk about 3,000, the most draconian scenario. So I don't know the exact number, honestly. But indeed, there are a lot of political prisoners in Venezuela, and they are on draconian conditions. A handful of them have passed away in custody because they are on very horrible conditions. But anyways, the amnesty law is approved by Delcy Rodriguez, and the people of the Chavismo, in order to release almost every political prisoner in the country. Now, there have been several hundreds of releases, roughly 200 with Maduro. Actually, still Maduro was in charge, the last week of Maduro in charge. And with Delcy Rodriguez, the last number that I have is something roughly 300. But still, a long way to go, people that should not be imprisoned on the first place. But why is this important to you? Because that is signaling that Venezuela is becoming less risky and more trustworthy regarding institutions. So, if you care about doing something in Venezuela, business, leisure, travel, tourism, expat, passport bro, whatever, you need, of course, more trustworthiness from the institutions, and this particular law gives the Venezuelan government way more trustworthiness. Now, of course, that combined with the US presence in the country that is very active, to say the least. Well, anyways, we still have waiting what's going to happen with that. We have to talk about the flights, of course, in a minute, and I have to address the safety situation in Venezuela. Yeah, we're kind of on the halftime here here on the live stream. Yeah, I'm not used to doing this live stream, so please bear with me. Okay. Well, I'm going to address very quickly the situation with Citgo. Citgo is an oil multinational that works in the United States that is owned by the Venezuelan quote-unquote state. What happens with Citgo? Citgo is a company that has several refineries in the US southwest of the country, Texas, Louisiana. The headquarters are in Houston. This company was bought by the Venezuelan government way back. Back then, it wasn't the Chavismo, was way before that. And technically, the US doesn't allow foreign countries to invest on, or to own US energy assets. Something like that. I mean, I don't know exactly the law, but something of that nature. Venezuela, back then, on the 80s and the early 90s, got a waiver, since back then Venezuela was a trusted ally of the United States. Yeah, so way back. And they were able to purchase Citgo. Citgo is a company that owns several refineries on the Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America, as you want to call it, in order to process the Venezuelan crude oil that is heavy. And these particular refineries are modified. The refineries are fit in order to refine this particular Venezuelan crude oil. But they can refine other kinds of oil. Anyways, what happened is that, of course, the Citgo was used as collateral for the Venezuelan government with Chavez and Maduro in order to issue debt. And that debt is on default, or is close to being on default right now, since, the bunch of issues, the economic collapse, and also the loss of recognition of Maduro's government. And Citgo was basically taken away from Maduro's control, not from Venezuela's control, but from Maduro's control. And since 2017, 2019, it's being controlled by a board of Venezuelans not related with Maduro or the current government that were designated by Trump. Remember, Maduro is not recognized as the Venezuelan president since 2017, something like that, on the US that recognize other figures. The most famous one is, of course, Juan Guaido, that is nobody right now. But anyways, the main point is that Citgo is right now in control of Venezuelan individuals that are completely adversaries of the government with Maduro and Delcy Rodriguez or whatever. But still, the creditors of that particular debt that Citgo was used as collateral, they want the company. But thanks to movements of the US federal government, they keep that sellout. They want to sell it in parts, basically cents on the dollar. But the federal government is sentencing the laws and the courts and whatever. They are sentencing that Citgo is on hold to be sold in order to wait if the Venezuelan legitimate authorities by the US legal system they can take it back. And this is important because Citgo is designed to buy the Venezuelan crude oil. So if the Venezuelan, a new trusted government by the United States is in place in Venezuela, again, they can get back Citgo and basically pay back and forth, send the crude oil, get the cash back to Venezuela, and with that, rebuild the country. That's kind of the game plan. And right now, many people saying that Citgo was lost, but apparently not yet. There is a lot of chances that Venezuela eventually gets back Citgo, and this is very important. And also, Citgo right now is operating with excellent cash flow. They seek to have direct access to the Venezuelan oil, like many other refineries in the US and the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. They want such access to this particular crude oil. So for the people saying that the Venezuelan crude oil is not valuable, what else can I tell you? I mean, these people are wrong, and whatever. You want to trust someone that doesn't know anything about Venezuela or crude oil or science or common sense or whatever? Well, that's up to you. But I still have to keep, beating this dead horse once and once and once again. And now let's go with the flights to Venezuela. And we had, actually, until 2024, we got several flights, international flights to Venezuela. But the problem is after the election crisis that we got, after that election crisis that the Venezuelan Maduro's government broke diplomatic relationships with several countries, when this thing happens, what the Venezuelan government does, I mean Maduro's government, is they start feeding and pounding sand and whatever. They close diplomatic ties and also close the direct flights to those countries, basically acting like as a petulant child. And a lot of flights were canceled back then. That was 2024. Costa Rica then had it, but the Dominican Republic that are coming back. I don't know when, maybe April-ish, you might say. With Panama, those were returned like a year afterwards. And also we got this situation on 2025, of course, that the FAA, the US Aviation Authority, issued a particular security notification advising the commercial airlines to not fly, suggesting not flying close to Venezuela because something might happen, and that indeed happened. But that particular security notification was removed. Therefore, that allows the airlines to come back again to the country or start new routes, the ones that don't have operations or never had operations in the country. And the situation with the US, why it was technically illegal not only to fly directly from the US to Venezuela, back and forth, for a particular security issue by the Department of Transportation. And it was also illegal to do cabotage, basically charter flights, connecting flights, selling the direct connecting flight, for instance, going from the US to Venezuela, using Panama or Dominican Republic as a scale. That was also not allowed. But that particular restriction apparently is going to be removed, and you can travel back from the US and Venezuela. We're going to address that a little bit later. Now, after all of those restrictions are being removed, new flights or some flights that were operating in the recent past, they're going to resume their operations. Okay, we have Bogota, we have Avianca and LATAM. They're going to travel to the country basically daily between Bogota and Caracas. There are another Colombian routes, but I'm going to mention just the main ones. Madrid is going to be served. There are like 5-6 airlines doing that particular back and forth between Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and Madrid. Laser Airlines, a Venezuelan airline, is going to do those flights as well. They're going to resume just this month, actually, according to the source, February 18. But other ones like Air Europa, Iberia, Plus Ultra, and a couple of more that I don't have in my mind, they are going to resume those flights. There is a very coveted air route, the one between Caracas and Madrid. Madrid is like HQ2 or HQ3 of the Venezuelan people. Madrid, we're going to have, now let's go with Brazil. We're going to have a handful of routes to Manaus in Brazil, to Boa Vista, and Sao Paulo. Manaus and Boa Vista are going to be with Rutaca, that is a Venezuelan airline, and Sao Paulo is going to be served by GOL, G-O-L, that is a huge Brazilian airline. Medellin, coming back again with Wingo and Avior. Avior is a Venezuelan airline, Wingo is a Colombian one. They're going to start in March, so you can come from Medellin. I know some of you either live or like very much Medellin. Istanbul, that of course served by Turkish Airlines. Istanbul will be resumed because that was a daily flight basically that we got between Istanbul and Caracas by Turkish. It was closed on November, thanks to the special, military operation, the prelude of the special military operation. But anyways, it's gonna resume that particular airline, that particular route. Anyway, also with Portugal, we have Lisbon. Between Caracas and Lisbon, by late March, the operations will resume by TAP Portugal. And the biggest one, this was the one that generated the most news, is American Airlines coming back to Venezuela. They will serve the route between Miami and Caracas, and it's a very coveted route. And Miami, like I said, Madrid is the HQ3. Well, Miami is the HQ2 of the Venezuelan basically population. Is the most committed air route that we have in the country, going to Miami. American Airlines had a significant presence of several decades in Venezuela. They not only serve that route to Miami, but also the route to other routes like New York, like I remember Dallas. I took that flight once. Dallas is kind of like the other HQ that American Airlines has. And it's very profitable. For the airline, it's going to be very, very profitable. You just need, of course, the licenses and the red tape in order to get this thing. There are a handful of others, but those are the main ones, the main announcements that we got this week. Anyways, lastly, we're gonna close with the safety situation in Venezuela. Is safe visiting in Venezuela? I'll say yes. Here's why. I remember I recorded a piece regarding safety in Venezuela. It was on Christmas, so pretty recently. I gave the kind of like the notice that I don't recommend it. I did not recommend you guys to travel to Venezuela if you're an international. Not because, Venezuela is fairly safe, honestly, for Latin American standards. I always say Venezuela is safer on the street level compared to Mexico, to Colombia, and Brazil. And I own this and I'm gonna die on that hill. However, what makes Venezuela very unsafe is how random and arbitrary are the local authorities on the street level. Talking local police officers or people like that. And since the instructions that these people have are unclear, they do random things that sometimes very unlikely that something bad happens, but when it happens, it's awful. And that's what made Venezuela unsafe until recently. Now, since we have a clearer rule of law and clearer direction from the top authorities in the country, that makes on the street level, the local authorities are going to be more trustworthy. So, Venezuela, I would say, yeah, is fairly safe. Just exercise general precautions, common sense, know what you're doing, and you're going to be fine. The other issue regarding safety in Venezuela for internationals are, the US citizens. Since until just a few weeks, Venezuela and the United States were geopolitical enemies, and it is what it is, talking on the political level. Especially when Donald Trump and there is a lot of distrust, a lot of US citizens were detained, maybe for dubious reasons, some legitimate, some not that legitimate. But anyways, there is a concern back then by the local authorities that some US citizens could be, someone working for the government or whatever, or a spy. And in some cases that was actually the case. And so traveling for a US citizen until just a couple of weeks, traveling to the US, traveling to Venezuela is complicated by the local authorities. And every time the local authorities see a US citizen traveling to Venezuela, that raises a red flag. And then, and the other thing is that the US, on the past 7 years or something, they did not have a diplomatic presence in the country. You don't have an embassy, an official one at least, or whatever. And that makes it even more difficult to travel or even be safe in the country. However, after the recent events, the US has a significant presence in the country, to say the least. They have an embassy, they have a head of mission, they have a grip on the country, therefore they can take care of their citizens in the country. That also motivates the local authorities to be less random and less arbitrary. And that's the reason why I'm saying this very responsibly, that traveling to Venezuela, again, for US citizens is fairly safe. Of course, within reason. It's not like you're traveling to, I don't know, Switzerland or something, but I'm hearing that Switzerland has some security problems as well recently, something like that. Not an expert on that, just read it a couple of times on Twitter. Whatever. Well, anyways, that will be all for today. This update of Venezuela on Venezuela Insider. Thanks again for your attention, and we'll see each other on the next video.